The massive war room buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered around the holographic display. Admiral Velthar Kresh stood at the center, his reptilian scales shifting from deep green to worried yellow. The 3-meter-tall Saurian had commanded fleets for over 300 years, but today felt different. Today felt like failure. The hologram showed a planet spinning slowly in the artificial light. Kepler 442b looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans, white clouds, and continents rich with minerals that could power 1,000 worlds. But everyone in the room knew the truth. This planet was a graveyard. General Quindal Voss clicked her mandibles together in the pattern that meant deep concern. The insectoid commander's compound eyes reflected the hologram's light as she studied the data streams. Her species had lost 12,000 soldiers on that world. The best of the best. Gone without a trace. Show them the timeline, Admiral Kresh said to his aide. His voice carried the weight of command, but also something else. Fear. The hologram changed. Now it showed dates and numbers that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. 3 months ago, the proud Zilithian Death Guards had landed with 20,000 warriors. They were legendary fighters who had conquered 47 worlds. The last transmission came 6 hours after landing. Then silence. 2 months ago, the Corvin Siege Legion tried next. 15,000 soldiers with the best armor in the galaxy. They lasted 3 days before all contact stopped. Their dropships were found empty, floating in orbit like ghost vessels. 1 month ago, the Nexari Quantum Marines made their attempt. These were soldiers who could phase through solid matter and bend reality with their minds. 18,000 of them descended to the surface. None returned. Over 50,000 soldiers, Admiral Kresh said slowly. Our best warriors from 3 different species. All lost to whatever lives down there. The display showed the planet's surface. Orbital scans revealed massive tunnel systems that went deep underground. Something lived in those tunnels. Something that ate armies. Commander Yoon Tai-min stood quietly near the back of the room. The human was smaller than most beings present, but he carried himself with calm confidence. His dark eyes watched the display without showing any emotion. Several alien commanders glanced at him with curiosity. Humans were new to the Galactic Council. Most species still didn't know what to make of them. The preliminary scans show extensive underground networks, General Voss said. Her translator made her clicking sounds into words. Whatever species lives there has had millions of years to develop these tunnel systems. They know every passage, every hiding spot. The gravity is also a problem, added another commander. 2.3 times standard. Most species can barely move effectively down there. Admiral Kresh nodded grimly. The atmosphere contains methane and sulfur compounds. Toxic to most of us, and the native life forms. He paused as the display showed brief footage from the few drone survivors. Massive creatures with too many legs and razor-sharp claws moved through the tunnels like liquid death. The Shrikes, someone whispered. That's what the first expedition had named them before going silent. Nobody wanted to say the name too loudly. So what do we do? Asked Commander Thexlar from the Aquatic Federation. Do we abandon the planet? Let them keep those mineral resources? The Strategic Council has already made that decision, Admiral Kresh announced. We're pulling back from the system. Kepler 442b is officially classified as a no-contact zone. Any species that wants to try their luck is welcome to it, but the Galactic Council will not waste more lives on that death world. That's when Commander Yoon stepped forward. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as he walked to the center of the room. All eyes turned to him. Excuse me, Admiral, he said politely. I need to inform the Council of something important. Admiral Kresh's scales shifted to orange with annoyance. Commander, this is not the time for human observations about our military strategy. No, sir, Yoon replied calmly. I need to report that the first human expeditionary force deployed to Kepler 442b 6 days ago. The room went completely silent. You could hear the hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of computer systems, but no one spoke. No one even breathed. Admiral Kresh stared at the human. His mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. You did what? We deployed soldiers to the planet, sir. Standard colonization protocol. Captain Park Jiwoo is leading the mission with 500 volunteers. General Voss's mandibles clicked so fast they sounded like static. You sent soldiers there? That world has consumed every military force we've thrown at it. Your species will be extinct within a solar cycle. Commander Yoon's expression didn't change. He looked as calm as if he was discussing the weather. With respect, General, you sent soldiers to fight a planet. We sent humans to make it home. This is madness, Admiral Kresh hissed. His scales had turned bright red with anger and disbelief. Do you understand what you've done? We've lost over 50,000 elite warriors to that place. Your entire species has fewer people than we lost in our first attempt. I understand your concern, Admiral, Yoon said, but humans approach these situations differently than other species. Differently how? General Voss demanded. Those creatures down there don't care what species you are. They'll kill you just the same. Commander Yoon was quiet for a moment. He looked around the room at all the worried faces and angry expressions. When he spoke again, his voice was steady and sure. The Zilithian Death Guards landed with heavy weapons and armored vehicles. They set up a military base and started hunting the native species. The Corvin Siege Legion brought mining equipment and began strip mining operations. The Nexari Quantum Marines used their reality-bending powers to try reshaping the planet's surface. He paused and touched the display controls. The image changed to show a different kind of landing. Small groups of humans in simple gear, spreading out across the planet instead of gathering in one place. Captain Park's teams landed in small groups. No heavy weapons, no mining equipment, no attempts to change the planet. They brought seeds, water purification systems, and basic shelter materials. Seeds? Admiral Kresh looked confused. What good are seeds against creatures that destroyed 3 armies? Our people aren't there to fight the planet, Admiral. They're there to live on it. The room erupted in confused chatter. Beings from dozens of species spoke in their native languages. Trying to understand what the human meant, how could anyone live on a world that killed everything that touched it? Commander Yoon waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke again, and his words changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans. Every species in this room looks at Kepler 442b and sees an enemy to defeat. Humans look at it and see a new home to discover. That's why your armies failed, and that's why our people will succeed. Admiral Kresh felt something cold move through his blood. He had seen humans fight. They were tough and clever and never gave up. But this was different. This was beyond fighting. This was about becoming part of something instead of destroying it. Commander, he said slowly, what aren't you telling us about your species? Yoon smiled for the first time since entering the room. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that would change everything. Admiral, in the past year, humans have successfully established colonies on 17 worlds that other species classified as uninhabitable. Ice worlds, lava planets, gas giant platforms, underwater cities, and radiation zones that would kill most life forms. The room went silent again. This time it was the silence of realization. We don't conquer worlds, Admiral. We adapt to them. We find ways to belong. And on Kepler 442b, our people aren't just surviving. According to the last transmission we received 12 hours ago, they're thriving. Admiral Kresh looked at the small human standing before the greatest military minds in the galaxy. For the first time in 300 years of military service, he felt like he was seeing the future of warfare, and it terrified him. The methane storms hit Kepler 442b every morning like clockwork. Sergeant Lee Dong-woo watched the purple clouds roll across the alien landscape from inside his team's shelter. The wind howled outside, carrying poisonous gases that would kill most galactic species in minutes. But Lee wasn't worried. His team had been on this planet for 2 weeks now, and they were still alive. Storm's passing, said Private Kim Soo-jin from her position near the shelter's entrance. She was monitoring the atmospheric readings on a device she had built from salvaged alien equipment. Kim was the team's engineer, and she could make useful tools from almost anything. Good, Lee replied. We need to check the tunnel system today. Command wants a full report on the underground networks. Corporal Choi Min-ho looked up from his communication equipment. He had been trying to contact other human teams scattered across the planet. I've got signals from Teams Beta and Gamma. They're both doing well. Team Delta found something interesting about 40 kilometers north. What kind of interesting? Asked Private Lim Hee-won. She was the team's medic, but she also studied alien life forms. On this planet, understanding the native creatures was just as important as treating injuries. They found a Zilithian weapons cache, Choi said. Heavy plasma rifles, personal shields, the works. All abandoned, Lee frowned. The Zilithians had been the first alien species to try conquering this world. They were famous for never leaving equipment behind. If they abandoned their weapons, something had gone very wrong. Any sign of the soldiers who carried them? Lim asked quietly. No bodies. just the gear scattered around like they dropped everything and ran. The team fell silent. They had found similar scenes before. Alien military equipment left behind in perfect condition, but no trace of the soldiers who had used it. The other species that tried to colonize this planet had simply vanished. "All right," Lee said, standing up. "Let's gear up and head underground. I want to see what made 3 armies disappear." The team put on their environmental suits and checked their equipment. Unlike the heavy armor that alien soldiers used, human gear was light and flexible. They carried basic weapons, but mostly they brought tools for survival and exploration. The entrance to the tunnel system was a natural cave opening about a kilometer from their shelter. The gravity on this planet was more than twice what humans were used to, but Lee's team had been training in high gravity for months before deployment. They moved carefully but steadily across the rocky ground. Inside the cave, the walls were smooth and rounded. These tunnels had been carved by something over millions of years. The passages went deep underground, forming a maze that stretched across the entire planet. "Look at this," Kim said, pointing to scratches on the tunnel wall. "These marks are too regular to be natural. Something made them deliberately." Lim knelt down and examined the scratches with her scanner. The depth and spacing suggest claws about 15 centimeters long. Multiple sets working together. "Pack hunters," Lee said grimly. "That would explain why the alien armies had trouble. Most species in the galaxy fought as individuals or small groups. If the native creatures worked together in large packs, they could overwhelm even well-armed soldiers." The team moved deeper into the tunnels. Choi left small communication devices along their path so they could find their way back and stay in contact with the surface. The passages branched and twisted in patterns that seemed almost designed to confuse invaders. After an hour of careful exploration, they found their first piece of real evidence. A Corvan battlesuit was embedded in the tunnel wall. The armor was partially melted as if exposed to intense acid. How did it get up there? Kim wondered. The suit was 3 meters above the tunnel floor. "Something threw it," Lim said after examining the damage. "Look at these marks. This armor was grabbed by multiple claws and hurled against the wall with tremendous force." Lee studied the scene. The Corvans were massive beings, almost as big as the Saurians. Their battlesuits weighed over 200 kilograms. Whatever had done this was incredibly strong. "Sir," Choi whispered urgently, "I'm picking up movement on the motion sensors." Something big about 50 meters ahead. The team immediately went silent and still. Lee hand-signaled for them to move to defensive positions. They had all heard the stories about the Shrikes, the name given to the native predators that had destroyed every army sent to this planet. The sound started as a soft clicking, like metal tapping against stone. It echoed through the tunnels, making it hard to tell exactly where it was coming from. Then the clicking got faster and louder. Lee saw it first. A shape moved in the shadows ahead and his blood went cold. The creature was huge, at least 4 meters long and 2 meters tall. It had 6 legs that ended in razor-sharp claws, and its body was covered in dark chitin that looked harder than steel. But the worst part was its head. Multiple eyes glowed with pale light and its mouth was full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. This was a Shrike. This was what had killed 50,000 alien soldiers. The creature stopped when it saw the humans. For a long moment, nobody moved. Lee could hear his team breathing through their suit's communication system. His hand was on his weapon, but he didn't draw it. Something about the creature's posture made him hesitate. The Shrike wasn't attacking. It was watching them. "Nobody move," Lee whispered. "I don't think it sees us as a threat." "Sarge, that thing could rip us apart in seconds," Kim breathed. "Maybe. But look at its body language. It's curious, not aggressive." Lim slowly activated her biological scanner. The device was designed to analyze alien life forms without threatening them. "Incredible," she whispered. "The neural activity suggests high intelligence. This isn't just a predator. It's thinking." The Shrike tilted its head, studying the humans with obvious interest. Then it did something that changed everything. It clicked its claws against the tunnel wall in a slow, deliberate pattern. 3 short clicks, pause, 3 long clicks, pause, 3 short clicks. "It's trying to communicate," Choi said in amazement. Lee made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in any alien military. Instead of raising his weapon, he stepped forward slowly and clicked his equipment against the tunnel wall. 3 short clicks, pause, 3 long clicks, pause, 3 short clicks. The Shrike's eyes brightened. It repeated the pattern, then added new sequences, more complex rhythms that seemed to contain meaning. It's intelligent, Lim said, her voice full of wonder. The other armies tried to fight them, but these creatures can think and plan and communicate. Kim looked around the tunnel with new understanding. No wonder the aliens lost. They came here with weapons and tried to kill everything. But you can't win a war against an intelligent species on their home ground. The Shrike watched the humans for several more minutes. Then, without any sign of aggression, it turned and disappeared into the deeper tunnels. Its clicking calls echoed back to them, but the sounds were different now. Less threatening, more like an invitation. What just happened? Choi asked. Lee smiled inside his helmet. I think we just made first contact. Real contact, not the kind that ends with shooting. The team made their way back to the surface, their minds racing with possibilities. When they reached their shelter, Lee immediately sent a report to Captain Park Ji-woo. Command, this is Recon Team Alpha. We've made contact with the native species. They're intelligent and willing to communicate. The previous expeditions failed because they treated this as a military conquest instead of a first contact situation. Captain Park's response came back quickly. Understood, Sergeant. Continue your mission, but approach with caution. We're not here to fight these creatures. We're here to learn how to live alongside them. That night, as the team settled in to rest, Lim looked out at the alien landscape under the planet's 3 moons. The other species saw this world as something to conquer. They saw the Shrikes as monsters to destroy. And what do we see? Lee asked. Neighbors, she said simply. We see potential neighbors. In the distance, they could hear the clicking calls of the Shrikes echoing through the tunnels. But the sounds weren't threatening anymore. They were starting to sound like conversation. 6 months had passed since the first human teams landed on Kepler 442b. What started as scattered groups of 500 soldiers had grown into something nobody expected. Colonel An So-young stood on the observation deck of what the humans now called New Busan, watching the morning shift change in the underground city they had built. The settlement stretched through natural caverns and artificial tunnels for over 3 kilometers. Humans moved through the passages alongside creatures that had once been called monsters. Shrikes walked next to people carrying supplies, their clicking conversations mixing with human voices in a symphony of 2 species, learning to live together. Dr. Bay, show me the latest research, Colonel An said to the scientist beside her. Dr. Bei Junsu pulled up his datapad with obvious excitement. He had been studying the Shrike since the first peaceful contact, and every day brought new discoveries. Colonel, what we've learned changes everything we thought we knew about this planet. The display showed detailed biological scans of Shrike communities. They're not just intelligent predators. They're a complex society with family groups, territories, and cultural traditions. The tunnels aren't random hunting grounds. They're neighborhoods. Colonel An studied the data with growing amazement. How did the previous expeditions miss this? Because they never tried to understand, Dr. Bay explained. The Zilithians, Corvins, and Nexari all landed with military objectives. They set up bases on the surface and began extraction operations. To the Shrikes, they looked like parasites attacking their home. On the display, Dr. Bay showed footage of human-Shrike interactions. A human engineer worked alongside 2 Shrikes to repair a water recycling system. The creature's precise claws were perfect for delicate work, while human problem-solving helped optimize the design. The Shrikes have been trying to protect their planet from what they saw as an invasion, Dr. Bay continued. But humans approached them as potential neighbors instead of enemies. Once we started communicating, everything changed. Master Sergeant Kang Hyun-woo joined them on the observation deck. His clothes were dirty from the morning training session, where he taught new arrivals how to move through the tunnel systems like natives. Colonel, the integration program is ahead of schedule, he reported. New people are learning Shrike movement patterns in half the time we expected. And the Shrikes are teaching us things about tunnel navigation that we never could have figured out alone. Colonel An watched a group of human children playing with young Shrikes in one of the common areas. The scene would have terrified most galactic species, but here it looked perfectly natural. What's the population count now? Just over 10,000 humans, Kang replied. And we estimate about 15,000 Shrikes in the immediate area. But the numbers keep growing. Word is spreading through both communities that this arrangement works. Lieutenant Jang Eun-ji hurried up to join the group. Her intelligence reports had been crucial in understanding why the human settlement succeeded, where alien armies failed. Colonel, I have news from the surface monitoring station. She activated her portable display showing orbital scans of the planet. 3 more Shrike communities have sent communication requests. They want to establish contact with human groups. Dr. Bay's eyes lit up. That's incredible. We started with one local community and now others are actively seeking us out. There's more, Lieutenant Zhang continued. The mineral surveys show something interesting. Areas where humans and Shrikes work together are producing 30% more rare minerals than our original estimates suggested. Colonel An raised an eyebrow. How is that possible? The Shrikes know the tunnel systems better than any scanner could map them, Dr. Bay explained. They've been living here for millions of years. They know exactly where the richest deposits are located, and they're sharing that information with us. Master Sergeant Kang nodded. It's not just mining. They're teaching us about the local ecosystem, weather patterns, and how to predict the methane storms, knowledge that would have taken us decades to learn on our own. The group moved to the communications center, where Corporal Choi Minho was monitoring messages from other human settlements across the planet. The original 500 soldiers had spread out to make contact with Shrike communities in different regions. Reports from all teams are positive, Colonel, Choi said. Team Delta has established a joint research station with a Shrike science community. Team Gamma is working with Shrikes to develop new agricultural techniques for growing earth crops in local soil. Colonel An studied the communication board. Green lights showed successful human-Shrike partnerships across the planet. Only 6 months ago, this world had been considered uninhabitable. Now it was becoming humanity's most successful colony. Colonel, Dr. Bay said quietly, there's something else you need to know. Something about why the other species really failed here. He brought up biological analysis of the previous expeditions. The Shrikes didn't just defend their territory. They studied the invaders. Each species that came here had similar approaches. Large military forces, heavy weapons, surface installations, and resource extraction without regard for the local ecosystem. So the Shrikes adapted their defenses, Colonel An realized. Exactly. By the time the third expedition arrived, the Shrikes had developed specific tactics for dealing with each type of military approach. They learned to coordinate attacks that could overwhelm any traditional army. Lieutenant Zhang pulled up tactical analyses, but humans did everything differently. Small groups, underground integration, communication attempts, and ecosystem cooperation. The Shrikes had no defensive protocols for that approach because it wasn't an attack. We didn't trigger their defenses because we weren't acting like invaders, Master Sergeant Kang said with understanding. Dr. Bay nodded. More than that. We offered something no previous species had. Partnership instead of domination. The Shrikes are incredibly intelligent, but they've been isolated on this planet for millions of years. Contact with humans gives them access to new technologies and ideas. Colonel An received an incoming message on her personal communicator. The transmission came from Admiral Velthar Kresh of the Galactic Council. She read it with growing concern. They're demanding our evacuation, she announced to the group. The Admiral says this planet is too dangerous for permanent colonization. He's threatening to send a rescue fleet. The group exchanged worried looks. A Galactic Council rescue operation would destroy everything they had built. The alien fleets would see the Shrikes as threats to be eliminated, not partners to be protected. What are our options? Lieutenant Zhang asked. We could refuse the evacuation order, Master Sergeant Kang suggested. This is a human colony now. We have the right to self-determination. Dr. Bay looked troubled. But if they send a military fleet and the Shrikes perceive it as another invasion, it would be a massacre, Colonel An finished. The Shrikes now have detailed knowledge of galactic military tactics from studying the previous expeditions. A council fleet wouldn't stand a chance. Corporal Choi received an urgent communication from Captain Park Jiwoo at the main settlement. Colonel, Captain Park requests immediate conference. He says it's about the evacuation order. The group made their way to the main command center where Captain Park was waiting with several Shrike representatives. The sight still amazed Colonel An. Humans and Shrikes working together in the same room, sharing data and making joint decisions. Colonel, Captain Park began, we've discussed the situation with our Shrike partners. They understand the threat that a Galactic Council fleet represents. One of the Shrikes, whom the humans called Elder Kasthak, clicked a complex message. Dr. Bay translated using the communication system they had developed. Elder Kasthak says the Shrikes remember the previous invasions. They're prepared to defend the planet again if necessary. But they prefer the human solution. What solution? Colonel An asked, Captain Park smiled. We invite the Admiral down to see what we've built. Show him that this isn't a military occupation that needs rescue. It's a successful colony that proves humans and shrikes can work together. And if he refuses, then we send him a message that will change how the galaxy thinks about impossible worlds, Captain Park said. We show him that when humans find a new home, we don't give it up easily. Colonel An looked around the room at the faces of her people and their Shrike partners. 6 months ago, this planet had been a graveyard that destroyed armies. Now it was home to a thriving community that no one wanted to leave. Send the invitation, she decided. It's time the galaxy learned what humans can really do. Admiral Velthar Kresh stared at the massive display screen on his flagship's bridge. Below them, Kepler 442b spun peacefully in space, looking nothing like the death world that had consumed 3 armies. His scales shifted to a nervous purple as he studied the sensor readings. Admiral, we're detecting extensive energy signatures from the planet's surface, reported his tactical officer. But they don't match any known weapon systems. What do they match? Admiral Kresh asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Power grids, sir. Communication networks. Industrial facilities. It looks like... The officer paused, checking his readings again. It looks like a thriving colony. Admiral Kresh had brought a massive rescue fleet to Kepler 442b. 12 ships carrying medical teams, evacuation transports, and enough firepower to level a small moon. He had expected to find human wreckage and maybe a few survivors hiding in caves. Instead, his sensors showed a civilization. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, the communications officer announced. Put it through. Captain Park Jiwoo's face appeared on the main screen. The human looked healthy and confident, nothing like a desperate survivor awaiting rescue. Behind him, Admiral Kresh could see what appeared to be a sophisticated command center. Admiral Kresh, welcome to New Busan. We received your message about evacuation procedures, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Captain Park, Admiral Kresh replied carefully. Our records show that you and your people have been trapped on a hostile world for over 6 months. We're here to bring you home safely. Captain Park smiled. With respect, Admiral, this is our home now, and we'd like to invite you down to see what we've built. Captain, that planet has killed over 50,000 soldiers from 3 different species. It's far too dangerous for a diplomatic visit. Admiral, those soldiers came here as invaders. You're coming as a guest. Trust me, there's a big difference. Admiral Kresh looked around his bridge at the confused faces of his crew. This conversation was not going according to any of his rescue protocols. Captain, even if you've managed to establish some kind of temporary shelter, this world is fundamentally hostile to galactic life. The gravity alone would cripple most species. Why don't you come down and judge for yourself? Captain Park suggested. I think you'll find that hostile and uninhabitable aren't the same thing. 2 hours later, Admiral Kresh found himself in a shuttle descending toward the planet's surface. His security team had insisted on full environmental suits and heavy weapons. The Admiral had agreed to the suits but left the weapons behind. Something about Captain Park's confidence made him think that shooting wouldn't help if things went wrong. The shuttle landed at coordinates provided by the humans. Admiral Kresh stepped out expecting to see a primitive camp or maybe some makeshift shelters. Instead, he found himself looking at a sophisticated landing pad built into the entrance of what appeared to be a vast underground complex. Captain Park was waiting for them, along with several other humans. But they weren't alone. Standing beside them were creatures that made Admiral Kresh's blood freeze. Shrikes. The monsters that had destroyed 3 armies were standing calmly next to humans like they belonged there. Admiral, I'd like you to meet Elder Kesthak, Captain Park said as if introducing old friends. She's one of our closest neighbors and partners in the colony project. The Shrike stepped forward and made a series of clicking sounds. A human translator repeated her words. Elder Kesthak welcomes you to the shared territory, and hopes this visit will lead to greater understanding between all species. Admiral Kresh stared at the scene in complete disbelief. His security team had their hands on their weapons, but the humans looked completely relaxed. One of them was actually scratching behind what appeared to be a young Shrike's audio receptors like it was a pet. How? Was all Admiral Kresh could manage to say. Come with us, Captain Park said. Let us show you what cooperation looks like. They entered the underground complex through passages that had clearly been designed for both human and Shrike use. The ceilings were high enough for the tall creatures, but walkways and control panels were positioned for human convenience. Everywhere Admiral Kresh looked, he saw the two species working together. In one area, human engineers worked alongside shrikes to maintain massive mining equipment. The creature's precise claws were perfect for delicate mechanical work, while human creativity had improved the efficiency of the operation by 40%. The shrikes have been mining these tunnels for millions of years, Captain Park explained as they walked, but they were limited by their technology. Human engineering has opened up new possibilities for them, and in return, Admiral Kresh asked, they've shared knowledge about this planet that would have taken us centuries to discover on our own. Weather patterns, geological formations, ecosystem management. They're the galaxy's greatest experts on extreme environment survival. They entered a vast cavern that had been converted into what looked like a city center. Admiral Kresh stopped walking and simply stared. Hundreds of humans and shrikes moved through the space together. Children of both species played in designated areas. Market stalls sold goods produced by joint human-shrike operations. This is impossible, Admiral Kresh whispered. Why? Asked Dr. Bei Junsu, joining the group. Because two intelligent species found a way to work together instead of fighting? Because this planet kills everyone who comes here, Admiral Kresh said, his voice rising with frustration. We lost 50,000 soldiers to this place. The best warriors in the galaxy couldn't survive here for more than a few days. Elder Kthak clicked a long message. The translator repeated her words slowly. Elder Kthak says that the previous visitors came as destroyers. They tried to take without asking, to change without understanding. The planet defended itself against attackers. But when humans came as friends seeking to learn and share, there was no need for defense. Dr. Bei pulled up a portable display showing biological data. Admiral, the shrikes are not mindless predators. They're a complex civilization with art, science, philosophy, and social structures. The previous expeditions triggered their defense protocols by acting like parasites. Defense protocols? Coordinated military responses developed over millions of years, Captain Park explained. The shrikes studied each invasion force and adapted their tactics accordingly. By the third expedition, they had become incredibly effective at destroying traditional military operations. Admiral Kresh looked around the thriving community. But they accepted you? We didn't come to conquer, said Colonel An So-young, approaching the group. We came to survive. And when we showed that we wanted to work with the planet instead of against it, everything changed. They continued the tour, visiting laboratories where human and shrike scientists worked together, agricultural areas where earth crops grew alongside native plants, and workshops where the two species created new technologies by combining their different strengths. In one of the most impressive areas, Admiral Kresh watched human children playing with young shrikes in what appeared to be a school environment. The sight of natural cooperation between species that should have been enemies left him speechless. How many humans are here now? He finally asked. Just over 15,000, Colonel An replied, and growing every month. We've had 3 more supply ships arrive with colonists who specifically requested assignment to New Busan. People want to come here? Admiral, this has become one of the most successful colonies in human history, Captain Park said with obvious pride. We're producing rare minerals at unprecedented rates, developing new technologies, and proving that intelligent species can cooperate instead of compete. Elder Kthak approached Admiral Kresh directly and spoke in slow, careful clicks. The translator repeated her message. She says that the shrikes have learned much from humans about other worlds and other species. They would welcome the opportunity to share their knowledge with the Galactic Council. Admiral Kresh felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. For over 300 years, he had seen space as a place where species competed for resources and territory. The idea that cooperation could be more effective than conquest challenged everything he believed about military strategy and galactic politics. Admiral, Captain Park said quietly, what we've built here could be the beginning of something much larger. Humans have successfully colonized 17 worlds that other species considered uninhabitable. We have a talent for making impossible places livable. What are you suggesting? A partnership. The Galactic Council has dozens of worlds with valuable resources that are too dangerous for conventional colonization. Humans could help other species reclaim those worlds, not through military conquest but through cooperation with native life forms. Admiral Kresh looked out over the underground city one more time. In 6 months, humans had transformed a graveyard into a garden. They had turned the galaxy's most feared predators into partners and neighbors. I need to contact the Council, he said finally. This changes everything we thought we knew about impossible worlds. As Admiral Kresh prepared to return to his ship, he watched a human child teaching a young Shrike how to play a simple Earth game. 1 year after Admiral Velthar Kresh's visit to New Busan, the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Ambassador Song Min-jung stood before the Galactic Assembly, looking out at representatives from hundreds of worlds. The Great Hall buzzed with excited conversation in dozens of languages. Honored delegates, Ambassador Song began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I'm here to present the annual report on the Human Extreme Environment Initiative. The massive display behind her showed a star map, dotted with green lights. Each light represented a world that had been considered uninhabitable until humans arrived. The number had grown from 17 to 43 in just 1 year. New Busan continues to thrive, Ambassador Song reported. The Human-Shrike partnership has produced mining yields that exceed all previous projections. More importantly, it has become a model for cooperation between species with completely different biological and cultural backgrounds. In the audience, Admiral Kresh watched with amazement. His own report about Kepler 442b had sparked the biggest change in galactic policy in centuries. The Galactic Council had officially designated humanity as extreme environment specialists, and requests for human assistance were pouring in from across the galaxy. The success at New Busan has led to 42 additional colony projects, Ambassador Song continued. Each one represents a world that other species had written off as impossible to inhabit. The display changed to show images from various human colonies. Ice worlds where humans had learned to work with crystalline life forms. Lava planets where partnerships with heat-based creatures had led to revolutionary energy production methods. Gas giant platforms where cooperation with floating organisms had created entirely new forms of architecture. But the real breakthrough, Ambassador Song said, isn't just that humans can survive in extreme environments. It's that we've learned to help other species reclaim their own lost worlds. The display showed before and after images of Zirion Prime, a desert world that the Aquatic Federation had abandoned centuries ago. Human engineers working with native sand-dwelling creatures had restored underground water systems, making the planet habitable for aquatic species once again. The Zirion project returned a dead world to the Aquatic Federation, Ambassador Song explained. Similar projects are underway for the Crystalline Confederacy and the Gas Giant Alliance. Humans aren't just claiming new worlds for ourselves. We're helping others recover what they thought was lost forever. In the back of the assembly hall, Commander Yoon Tae-min smiled quietly. The human who had first announced their deployment to Kepler 442b was now Admiral Yoon, head of the newly created Department of Impossible Worlds. His small office had grown into a major galactic organization, with requests for help coming in faster than they could process them. Admiral Kresh stood to address the assembly. His opinion carried weight with military commanders across the galaxy, and his endorsement of human methods had changed how many species approached dangerous worlds. Fellow delegates, Admiral Kresh began. 1 year ago, I thought the humans were committing suicide by sending soldiers to Kepler 442b. Today, I understand that we had been thinking about impossible worlds in completely the wrong way. The hall fell silent. Every species present had lost people to hostile environments. Many had written off entire star systems as too dangerous to approach. For thousands of years, our species have approached dangerous worlds as enemies to defeat. Admiral Kresh continued. We sent armies to conquer them, weapons to destroy their threats, and technology to force them into submission. And we failed, repeatedly. The display showed the casualty reports from dozens of failed colonization attempts. Thousands of ships lost, millions of lives ended, entire military units erased from existence. Humans taught us a different approach, Admiral Kresh said. They showed us that some challenges cannot be solved with force. Sometimes the answer is to become part of the solution instead of fighting the problem. Ambassador Song returned to the podium. The Department of Impossible Worlds has received colonization requests for over 200 worlds in the past year. We're working with requesting species to develop cooperation-based approaches for each unique environment. What's your success rate? Asked Delegate Theraven from the Silicon Collective. 93%, Ambassador Song replied. Of the 43 worlds we've attempted to colonize, 40 have resulted in successful long-term settlements. 2 are still in progress, and only 1 was abandoned due to environmental factors we couldn't overcome. The number sent whispers through the assembly. Traditional military colonization had success rates below 20% for hostile worlds. How do you do it? Asked Commander Zill of the Methane Breathers Union. We listen, Ambassador Song said simply. Every world has its own ecosystem, its own native life, its own natural patterns. Instead of trying to change these things, we learn to work with them. Admiral Yoon stepped forward to join the presentation. Our teams spend months studying each world before any colonization attempt. We identify native species, understand their needs and behaviors, and look for ways that human presence can benefit the existing ecosystem rather than disrupting it. But what about worlds with hostile life forms? Pressed General Cracks of the Heavy World Alliance. Some planets have creatures that attack anything they encounter. Even hostile behavior usually has a reason, Admiral Yoon explained. The Shrikes of Kepler 442b were hostile because previous visitors had threatened their young and destroyed their territory. When we approached them as potential neighbors instead of invaders, their entire response changed. The display showed footage from New Busan's most recent expansion. Human and Shrike construction teams worked together to build new residential areas. What had once been mortal enemies were now teaching each other new techniques for underground architecture. The key insight, Ambassador Song added, is that intelligence exists in many forms. What we call monsters are often just protective parents, territorial defenders, or creatures trying to survive in difficult conditions. Communication is usually possible even if it takes time to develop. Delegate Cora Sen from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition raised a concern that many species shared. This approach requires significant time and resources. Traditional military colonization may have lower success rates, but it produces faster results when it works. Admiral Kresh answered before the humans could respond. Delegate Sen, I've spent my career calculating the true costs of military operations. When you include the resources lost to failed attempts, the time spent rebuilding after failures, and the ongoing security needed to maintain military colonies, the human approach is actually more efficient. More than that, Admiral Yoon added, cooperative colonies are self-sustaining. Military colonies require constant support and protection. Partnership colonies become stronger over time as both species learn from each other. The display showed economic data from human colony worlds. Production levels, technological innovations, and population growth rates all exceeded expectations. More importantly, these colonies were attracting voluntary immigrants from multiple species. New Busan now hosts permanent residents from 12 different species, Ambassador Song reported. Beings come there to study human-Shrike cooperation methods, to research extreme environment survival techniques, and to develop new technologies that combine different species' strengths. What we've discovered, Admiral Yoon said, is that the galaxy is full of worlds that seem impossible, only because we've been approaching them with the wrong mindset. Cooperation opens possibilities that conquest never could. The Assembly voted unanimously to expand funding for the Department of Impossible Worlds. More significantly, they established new protocols for approaching hostile environments. The old method of sending massive military forces was officially discouraged in favor of small scientific teams focused on communication and cooperation. As the Assembly session ended, Admiral Kresh found himself talking with a group of young military officers from various species. They were eager to understand how the humans had achieved what traditional military doctrine said was impossible. Admiral, asked Lieutenant Vex of the Crystal Guard, how do we know when to fight and when to cooperate? Admiral Kresh considered the question carefully. Lieutenant, in my experience, the need to fight usually comes from a failure to communicate. When you encounter something hostile, ask yourself, what is it trying to protect? What does it need to feel safe? Most conflicts can be resolved without violence if you understand what both sides actually want. That evening, Admiral Yoon stood in his office aboard the orbiting station above New Busan. Through the viewport, he could see the planet that had once been called a graveyard. Now it glowed with the lights of a thriving civilization. Ships from dozens of species came and went, bringing supplies, researchers, and new colonists. His communication panel chimed with incoming messages. 3 new requests for impossible world consultations, 2 research proposals from galactic universities, and a personal message from Captain Park Jiwoo on the surface. Admiral, Park's message said, Thought you'd like to know that Elder Kasthak's daughter just enrolled in our engineering program.